All right, let's see, hello. Thank you so much, JD, for that warm introduction. I'm so happy to be here right now. I'm so happy to be at APAD, to be back at the Armory. Thank you all for coming to this talk. Thank you to the panelists for saying yes. When we came up with this idea, we were workshopping it to figure out which direction we wanted to go in, knowing we wanted to talk about the history of New York City and the way that New York City shows up now in photography. Researching, thinking, I was coming through with this list of women and starting to think about shaping it in the form of, these marginalized communities of women, and how our voices need to be seen, need to be heard, need to be validated. So it quickly changed directions. APAD was totally on board with it, and we just kind of ran from there. Sent out the emails, and everyone enthusiastically said yes right away. So that just validated that this conversation needed to be had, and yeah, I'm just so happy to be here with you all. All right, so I'm gonna start by talking about New York City tourism and conventions and the role in which photography shows up in our channels. But I wanted to first talk about the creative and content team and who we are. So we're a group of around 15 people, all diverse New Yorkers who come with their own various perspectives of the city. We're made up of creative directors, photo editors, video editors, designers, writers, content creators, and most of all we're all storytellers, and we're all passionate about this place. It's a privilege to go to work every day and get to think about New York, get to figure out ways of talking about New York, and to be able to collaborate with an amazing team of folks. Our company functions as an internal ad agency where all of the work that we do is all kind of one piece and one part kind of makes it the whole. It's a privilege, we get to talk about arguably the greatest city in the world. And our approach to photography, this is a slideshow actually, I should have mentioned that, of various, photographs that really speak to the ethos that we're trying to communicate. Our photography is deeply rooted in representation. It's one of our core values. We show New York's diversity. We show the people, the places, different perspectives. And we're really trying to show the cultural richness of the city. Self-expression, and the way the spirit kind of defines New York City is some of the ethos that we kind of operate under. A lot of the times the conventional tourism boards think about, this hyper-polished kind of formulaic kind of aesthetic of what a city should represent. And yes, we do that. We have channels that needs that kind of, bird's eye or iconic kind of view of New York. But we're constantly pushing against those constraints and thinking about how we can show a sense of place, how we can show connection, and how important eye-level kind of human interactions are to kind of show New York City as a visual place. And lastly, I'll just say through the photo department, through thoughtful commissions, we work with a various group of New Yorkers and luckily have this ability to work with them and have them kind of share their gifts with us, share their ways of seeing, share their points of view in their distinct kind of language that's embedded throughout our channels. Right. I think that's the end of that. So next, what I wanted to kind of discuss really briefly, because we don't have that much time, and this is a very complex conversation. Okay. With this panel and thinking about legacy and thinking about ways in which photography historically has shown up in the world, in our history books, in the ways in which we've all studied photography, thinking about women photographers, there's so many that we can cite, but really just contextualizing it within Alice Austen, Diane Arbus, and Nan Goldin, and the way in which these pioneers, these women, they were all kind of working under this way of photographing friends, strangers, lovers, They were photographing marginalized communities. They were photographing like what it meant to be in different classes, sexuality, the gender identity, and cultural stigmas. You know, from Alice Austen with her Victorian era age, photographing set up playful kind of moments within her friends, herself, her sexuality, being openly out at that point. Also, her work of coming into Manhattan and photographing the landscape, the changing Manhattan. A lot of those works, they're not as known as, you know, the portraiture, the self-portraiture she does, but it's a really amazing look at the way photography was used and what the city looked like at that point. To Diane Arbus, you know, what her work describes is the tenderness, the strangeness of the way in which she engaged, how vulnerability was at the surface of her work. To Nan Goldin, her diaristic kind of portrayals. Everything about these photographers, the commonality between all of them is that, you know, they shared the forces of what are the viewer looking at? Thinking about what's normal, what's beautiful, what's worthy of attention. There's so much layer and complexity here, and we don't have time necessarily to get into any of this right now. I just wanted to put some context or framework on it, and I know most of you are very familiar with this work anyways. I just wanted to introduce this as far as it relates to lineage of photographers and how contemporary photographers, everyone's kind of studying, knowing that work, and trying to add their voice and their point of view to it. And with that said, I'm going to start the introductions, and our panelists are going to briefly share their work with us so we can all kind of become familiar with what they're attempting to say with the camera. I'm so sorry. Okay, so first, here's our panel. So first we have Meryl Meisler. She was born in the Bronx, raised in Long Island. Inspired by her dad's family photos and Diane Arbus, she enrolled in a photography class at the University of University of Wisconsin in Madison that set her path. She moved to New York City in 1975 to study with Lisette Modell and has been in love with the city ever since. After years of teaching in New York City public schools, Meryl began sharing her vast archive of images, and I'm so glad that you did, because they're so important and so needed to be seen. The work is full of a sense of place, humanity, humor, and distinctly queer Jewish eye. She's represented by Clamp in New York City and Polka Gallery in Paris, and she continues to document the world with the same sharp curiosity. Meryl has a book that she's be signing today at Clamp at 4 to 5. Her new book, Streetwalker, that just came out. And she has a closing reception tomorrow for Care Condition Control at 601 Art Space from 6 to 8. So I'm going to pass it over to Meryl to give some, to speak about her work.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do we need?
Thank you. If you want to.
I'm more comfortable here. Thank you all for coming. Before coming here, I had a little bet with myself, and I won. Would my seatmates stand up a moment?
Oh.
Okay, my panel mates. And any self-identifying female street photographer, would you stand up a second?
Oh, this is.
There's something in general I've noticed, and I think there's a study to be done. I'm 5'1".
Oh, yeah?
There's something.
That's great.
I selected photographs that I felt emblemized like the New York City spirit. I mean, the stores, the signage, you know this is New York, this is Bushwick. I was a teacher in Bushwick for 14 years, and I took photographs on my way to and from work, and maybe during lunchtime. Do I advance it myself, or is it just pass? Okay. You don't have to go far. See the tree there? I lived in the house right behind it. So these are kids playing on the street. You know, this is so New York. The inventive spirit, it could be from the 20s, it could be 30s, it could be now. Across the street from the school where I taught in Bushwick. Kids fixing the bike and finding out that now, like, this one's an accountant, this one's a lawyer, they're doing well, they're doing fine, the kids are okay. You know, where else could you just walk along and be going out to one club and see the village people stepping out to perform at opening night of Xenon? And when I went out in the 70s, I felt like this was my Paris of the 30s. The performers, the lights, this woman, Dallas, she was performing in most of the clubs, and I wonder what became of her. And of course, we have our art history background. That was self-portrait. This is walking along, going from my school to a conference at another school. And generally, I ask permission. I saw this happening. I nodded, caught the moment, but it's also the music in the back. He was holding a boombox. And it's still happening. This is a current nightlife picture. Yes, I've never stopped, and yes, I'm going out again and bringing my camera. And this is a burlesque, drag queen, high femme performer, Miss Malice, out in Littlefield in Brooklyn. So there's a magic in this city. We feel it, we know it. You plug in, it's an energy center. And it has been for centuries. I think New York City is one of the energy centers of the planet Earth. And you know it, and you feel it, don't you? Thank you.
Oh.
I'm just going to come to the couch now. It's so cozy down here. Okay. All right, next up we have Christine. So Christine Osinski has sent, I'm going to start over. I'm all of a sudden like nervous holding this mic. Spent her career illustrating the overlooked from the working class neighborhoods of Staten Island to the textures of everyday American life. Her photographs reveal a quieter, slower New York, just a ferry ride from Manhattan. Christine's work has been exhibited at institutions including the Brooklyn Museum, the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C., and the Alice Austen House. She was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2005, and her photographs have appeared in Aperture, The New Yorker, The New York Times, and The Guardian. Her work is held in the collections of MoMA, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and many others. Her celebrated book, Summer Days, Staten Island, was shortlisted at Paris Photo Aperture Foundation First Book Award, and Christine holds an MFA from Yale and BFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago. You can see some of Christine's photographs up from Summer Days, Staten Island at Joseph Bellows at booth D8.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll be showing just a few images from 3 distinct bodies of work. I lived in Manhattan for 8 years, and after getting priced out, my husband and I moved to bought an old house and moved to what is referred to as the forgotten borough of Staten Island. So once we got there, I kept saying, where are we? You know, where is this place? So I decided to find out by taking my 4x5 and walking around. And people seemed to be very curious about my 4x5 camera and seemed very willing to let me take their photograph. I photographed strangers, people who I met once and then I never saw again. So this work was not a project initially. It was just a result of my wandering around as a flaneur, never knowing exactly who I might meet or what strange circumstance I'd find myself in. While I lived in Staten Island, I also photographed a women's amateur synchronized swimming group. And they met for decades. And they were females from about 8 years old through women in their 70s, all different body types trying to swim harmoniously with one another. Young women in bathing suits are rarely seen on their own terms, and older women in bathing suits are usually not seen at all. Unlike the prior work that I just spoke about, I really had to become an insider in order to gain the trust of these women, and I photographed them for over 20 years until they disbanded. I also rented a lot of boats and started photographing all the 38 small islands in New York City. This is Hart Island, New York City, Potter's Field, Hunter Island in the Bronx, a family vacationing on Coney Island, a homeless man after a really heavy rainstorm on Ward's Island, a deaf and a dumb man on Ward's Island also, and the Ruffle Bar in Queens. And I really believe that you have to experience New York not only by foot or subway, but by boat to really get a sense of what this place is really like.
Thank you, Christine. Next up, we have Elizabeth Bick, is a photographer whose work is deeply informed by her background in classical and modern dance that explores rhythm, repetition, and movement in public spaces. Her photographs have been exhibited at the institutes like Norton Museum, Ogden Museum, and Frankel Gallery. She's a recipient of grants from the Pollock Krausner and John Mitchell Foundation and has held residencies at the American Academy in Rome and the Santa Fe Art Institute. Elizabeth's work has appeared in New York Times, The New Yorker, and Time, and she's been commissioned by The Atlantic, Harper's, and NYC Tourism and Convention.
Yes, my favorite.
She is a photographer and professor at a photography professor at the college in Charleston and holds an MFA from Yale. Elizabeth has an upcoming exhibition of her summer solstice series, Oculus, at ARM Gallery in Dumbo, opening this fall.
Hi, everyone. And thanks for that introduction. I guess I want to start off by talking about how I really became a photographer long before I was even aware of the camera. I was in a room as a child, repeating the same gestures. The room was rectangular with mirrors, and my body was in the service of another. It was being guided by a choreographer, and that was a rigorous practice that I held until I retired at the old age of 18. After a few years of feeling lost in the world, I stumbled along with photography. And the moment, I remember this distinct moment when I held the viewfinder to my eye. There was this intense familiarity, this connection to dance through understanding sensitivity of body movement, staging, the rectangle. But there was also something really freeing and alien about it in the sense that I was no longer the one being observed and scrutinized, but I was the observer and the active audience member. And I don't think I would have fully clarified that connection and how important the two were together if it wasn't for New York City. So I really have the city to thank for that. Walking through the streets from place to place, I was constantly visually confronted with the choreographic voice that I knew that I found through seeing this. And, you know, the changing city, the light, the gestures of people, self-presentation in public was something that helped guide me. And so without that decade of formative years, I wouldn't be where I am as a photographer, and I have the city to thank for that. I have notes because I'm forgetful when I talk. I think that, well, this is a small collection over the years of multiple people. Some I've never interacted with, some I photographed with deeply for many years, who have a very strong performative self. And I feel like the way that I can kind of move through various methods and approaches through the city with my camera has enabled me to kind of discover a cross-disciplinary practice between dance, choreography, and just the everydayness, the everyday life of the city. I think that's my last, oh no. Is that my last slide? Oh, there's also, this is Linda Levin. She's a New York character, a native New Yorker. She's been photographed by many. And I made a connection with her 10 years ago on the subway, and we have been photographing together and friends ever since. I'm going to pay her a visit tomorrow after this, which I haven't seen in a while. I'm very excited to see her. And that's my last slide. Thank you so much.
Right. The next photographer that we have joining the panel today is Jutharat Poupay. Yes, got it? Okay. She's a Thai-born photographer based in New York City whose work Okay, I think that starts it. She is a Thai-born photographer based in New York City whose work captures the humor, absurdity, and quiet poetry of everyday urban life. With a foundation in street photography, Poupay brings a sharp observational eye and distinct sense of timing to her images. Seeking out moments of uncanny beauty, my favorite, by the way, long live the pidge, uncanny beauty in public spaces of New York City. Her approach is entirely direct while maintaining a fly-on-the-wall mindset, revealing the surreal undercurrents of the city without interfering with her. She works as a freelance photographer and is a regular contributor to the New York Times, New York Magazine, Vogue, New York Tourism, among others. Her photographs center the energy and unpredictability of New York, honoring the fleeting moments that make the city feel so alive. And I will start this over when it ends, because I realized I pressed play too soon.
It's okay. It's okay. You can just keep going.
It was fun to see.
Hi, I'm Poupay. Yeah, I moved from Bangkok to New York probably like 7 years ago. So I'm pretty new, because people say that being a New Yorker, you need to be here 10 years. So I'm almost there. But yeah, I love New York. What brought me here is because of the energy. I love everything that happened in the city. I always just go explore and taking street photography as a hobby before, and then I turned myself into more professionally because I think I really like this, so I try to hustle and make a living. And as far as now, I can do it, so I'm glad that I can make it work. But I still love going out and shooting in the street always, because it's New York and it's entertainment 24/7. You can go out in the block next to your neighborhood or in Midtown or anywhere in the city, and you can totally find something that is interesting. So I really love New York. Yeah. And I want to explore more in every boroughs, because I think there's so many beautiful things happening around the city, which I really enjoy.
Okay.
So we're going to have just a loop playing, basically, of what we just saw, just so we can remain familiar with all of the works that we are looking at. And thank you all for sharing your perspective. 3 minutes is so limiting, but it really gave us a sense of what you do and your focus. And I love all the different ways in which you enter photography and capturing the city. So I want to start by just talking about origin stories. What brought you to New York City? And how has your relationship changed over time? Do you want to start?
Certainly. I was born in the Bronx, and at age of 2.5, moved down to North Massapequa, Long Island. But our family was in the Bronx. We were in Long Island. Religiously, every other weekend we'd go to the Bronx, or they'd come to Long Island. And my dad's business, printing business, is in Manhattan, so we'd go to the city and go to see the circus, off-Broadway shows, Rockefeller Center as a teen, go on dates and go to Chinatown, go to concerts. And when it was time for college, I was accepted to Columbia, but I was terrified to go. Thought I would, this is 1969, I thought I'd be raped, killed, and chose to go to the Midwest. Coming 1975, graduating from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I wanted to study with Lizette Modell. I have a fourth cousin who had a home, a brownstone in New York on 92nd Street. There was a room for sublet. I got into Lizette Modell's class. I moved in. I realized I was home. This is where I belonged immediately. And I have never fallen out of love with New York City. My life has changed in my perspective. I'm one of those people who I photograph where I'm going. I don't go to photograph. And so my photographs are reflective of my life experience. So I worked as a freelance illustrator, went out at night, had older friends down the Lower East Side, hit all the boroughs according to where my life was going. And of course, when I became a full-time art teacher, I documented Bushwick because that's where I was teaching, because that's the photographs I've taken. I'd say the biggest significant change was in 1998, the good fortune of my spouse and I buying the dream, a weekend home in Woodstock and an apartment in New York City. I've lived in Brooklyn, I've lived in Manhattan, I'm in Chelsea. But bottom line, if I had to choose, New York City is the place. So that's my New York story.
Thank you. Christine?
I'm originally from Chicago, and I'm really used to city living. So a little while after graduate school, moved to New York City like most young artists to be among other artists and galleries. And so after living in a loft for about 8 years, we really kind of got priced out, and that's when we moved to Staten Island. And we lived there for a long time, 15 years. And I taught at Cooper Union for 30 years, so I was really, used to young artists, young people trying to be artists, and I was very involved with that.
Elizabeth?
My story is very dramatic. A hurricane brought me to New York. I was living in New Orleans, and Hurricane Katrina washed me away. And I received an opportunity I was invited to participate in Lower Manhattan Cultural Council's emergency grant residency for artists who had lost everything from Hurricane Katrina. And it was the only kind of thing it was the only option. It landed in my lap. And I remember the first time I got on the subway, I would sprint. I'd never been, I'm from a very kind of a gated community outside of Houston. And so I remember I was so confused and scared about the subway doors in particular. And I had to I would do a little leap because I was so scared of the gap. Just the fact that I feel like so much has changed because I can actually, fool people into thinking I belong here, I guess. And I would say just photographing the city and walking through it has monumentally changed even how I see myself in the world and how I understand my position as a photographer. I mean, when I came here, I did a deep dive into kind of the New York School of Photography and started to kind of have an identity crisis, like, should I be a street photographer? Is this, like, what is this canon? And really feeling like I both was part of photographing in the street, but also very much it didn't fit for me to be kind of a classical, canonical street photographer. And I think that being able to find the confidence to say kind of what the difference is and to kind of parse myself out from that and also be there with those street photographers has been a really important part of just being an artist.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
I'll keep it short and sweet because I know we have so many questions after this.
I know.
So, but yeah, what brought me to New York is the energy. I really love the pacing of New York. But what I really liked about New York is the rawness, and actually, like, I really love taking photo of trashes and like dirt in New York. I don't know why, but it's really drawn me because I feel like this is really the beauty of it, of New York. There's so many pretty things and also like very dirty, and I'm really drawn to it. So I like the mix of everything in New York City. Yeah.
Thank you, Poupay. Moving along. So thinking about the visual identity of New York City, as layered as and complex as it is, I'm curious about how different neighborhoods show up in your work, like Midtown or Bushwick or Staten Island, any place that you continue to go and try to photograph. And more importantly, how does the distinct place or sense of place show up in your work?
In general, I'd say New York City has beautiful light. And you've been to other cities, London, but here it's like Broadway lights everywhere. Of course, depending on the neighborhood and the density, the darks and lights change. And or so if you're in going to the Bronx or parts of Brooklyn that have had lower buildings or burnt out, you get more sunlight. Again, in general, I would go to places that I had friends or people visiting, and the different neighborhoods do look different. They have a distinct charm. But how people are dressed, of course, changes over time. But if you're Midtown and they're going to business or they're tourists, it's a different look than going to visit your grandparents' grave in Staten Island. It's a different look, right? So it's a very interesting city. It's all a stage.
Absolutely. And changing so rapidly, especially now. And Christine, do you want to check for that?
I think not all stories get written, not all people get recognized. And I guess I feel taking pictures can be an opportunity to take a second look or a third look. And I also think in terms of, I agree with what you say in terms of various neighborhoods, but I think also the city is much larger than we give ourselves time to look at. And, the history of the city, the geography of the city is amazing. And I think a broader view, like if people are looking here, maybe look over there or look over there. I think that's always an interesting possibility. And New York is so much bigger than we think. And the idea that 4 of the boroughs are islands, and within the 5 boroughs, there are 38 little islands. Some are inhabited by people, some are inhabited only by birds others by rats. It's really interesting. So I think New York is a very complex place. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, because we never think of all of these islands that
Yeah.
are out and in quarantine islands back. with
Yes.
Alice Austen.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
all of that
The history,
space.
I've done a lot of research.
yeah.
The history is incredible.
Absolutely. Thank you. Elizabeth?
There's no more perfect place to photograph than in Midtown Manhattan. For me, the backdrop's always changing, so my work becomes almost fictional when the backdrop doesn't exist anymore. It feels like, in a way, alien, small but also galactic. Everyone is there for a different reason and are kind of presenting themselves in one way and have this self-determination. The light and shadow play in Midtown Manhattan is also just completely uncanny. And one can be hidden in plain sight with a tripod, and people don't even seem to notice me when I'm there. And I just think of Dido Moriyama when he talks about how he's been photographing the same route for his entire life, and I feel like when I read that, I thought, okay, I'm just gonna do that in Midtown. Sometimes I stray away and think I need a break, but I always go back.
I love going and finding your little backgrounds. I see them often, and I'm like, there's Elizabeth's background. I watch the light change real quick.
Oh, see, that's a true friend.
Poupay?
I agree that Midtown Manhattan is really great to photograph. And I have that mentality always, like I need to go to Midtown Manhattan to take photos. But after a while, I feel like I want to explore out of Midtown Manhattan. So recently, I've been like going to Chinatown or like Flushing to photograph more, or like my neighborhood, like Woodside and Jackson Heights, because I feel like there's so many stories around other boroughs as well. And so I still keeping go back and forth between like, Midtown Manhattan, because there's so many things happening, of course, and also other boroughs.
Thank you. Going on to the next question, thinking about photography and how it gives us the reason to be present. Having a camera allows us to look unapologetically. There's this compulsion that photographers have to record, to fix time, and to kind of have an image bear witness of an experience or a moment or a feeling. I'm curious about that notion of the city of New York, our city that we live in, and then when you use your camera and all of a sudden something unfolds and the city becomes a stage, the city becomes a performance, intentional or not. It's unscripted, something just unfolds in front of your camera. And my question is around how do you assert authorship? And how do you make work that feels personal, that feels honest, or perhaps even new? Elizabeth, do you want to start with that one?
Oh, okay.
I'm putting you on.
I think photography lets me stay close to my first love, which is so many years spent practicing modern and classical ballet. And I feel like when I was trying to find my voice, again, kind of thinking about the history of representation in New York and the legacy of people who are walking the same streets that I was walking, and I kind of know those places. Arbus, Freelander, Winogrand, Lisette Model, right? That's where you studied, right?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And thinking like, is there a place for me there? I think a lot of us always think of that within photography, kind of anxiety of influence. And I think I figured it out through form and content, like how form and content are always together in a photograph. And again, going back to locking down a stage, so it really becomes first and foremost a sense of place and an understanding of how the camera can really transcend a formal mapping of the city in a way that our human eye experiences it, and what the camera's eye does that's very particular and kind of outside of our human experience, our visual experience. And so for me, I think it's, again, staying firm that although I'm photographing in the street, even in the same places that those street photographers have and continue to photograph, that there is a way to find a singular voice within that and to create other considerations. And also that there will always be that, and there's always more to do within a canon. That is one of the things that I love about photography and discourse and the history of it.
Thank you. I would love, Christine, for you to answer this question too, and because I love that there's such a different way that you and Elizabeth work.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear your point of view of when you're working with people, and yeah, so if you can kind of take that.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about choreography. I think it also a little bit in terms of taking pictures as a dance, but differently. I have no background in dance at all. When I photograph, I think of it as an adventure. And like, you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know what you're going to see, but I think of it as kind of an adventure and this kind of event, whether it's a medium format camera, which also looks weird to people, common people, or a 4x5 camera. It's a curiosity, and I guess I try to keep myself out of the picture. I do my dance behind the camera, and I don't really direct people. I let them do what they do. And sometimes, you know, I've regretted, perhaps I should have said, move your left foot a little bit, but I don't do that. I just record what's in front of me. And so, yeah, it's a dance too, but it's a little bit different. It's not as focused, I guess.
Well, I do agree that there's a communication between you and whomever you choose are photographing, even for a split second, that your molecules met. My guiding light is if I'm carrying my physical medium format camera or my phone, if I see something I've never seen before, I want to photograph it. If I see something that looks so typical that it could be a reenactment of a Norman Rockwell painting, I want to photograph it. Or if I see something that literally makes me smile, I want to photograph it. Just this morning on the way here, I didn't want to carry my camera. I have my phone. I get in the subway, and it is two teenagers hugging and kissing, and I wanted to take their picture. I said, but I try to be polite, and you know, they may not, they might be cheating on someone else. Their mother would kill them, I found out. So I actually went up close, and I said, you look sweet. I asked the girl first, because you don't want, do you mind if I took a picture of you just as you are hugging? And then she, to the, I guess, boyfriend, and they agreed, and that's it. So I do generally ask permission. And in our Zoom conversation beforehand, we were talking about, someone mentioned there's a place on 34th and 5th Avenue that everyone tries to go and be a street photographer. I've been here almost 50 years. I've never been there. Let's go.
I think I'm going to move on to the next question for the sake of time. And I'm going to move on to thinking about street photography, thinking about the legacy of perhaps a male approach to street photography. Arguably, a lot of times detached maybe in a way, or different than how women might approach the medium or the genre. Thinking about like women, and as they have their camera, as they have perhaps intent, they have a deeper emotional intelligence, focused on presence, reciprocity, and layered storytelling. So all that to say, I would like to ask how your own sensibility, emotional or intuitive, how does that shape the way you engage public spaces and the people when you photograph? Poupay, do you want to start with that one?
Okay. I don't think I'm not so sure. I think this question, people can answer it for me, but I don't think I have like that female gas. I'm not sure. I feel like my work is pretty like generic, like not any other side of the gender. But I have so many photos of kids and dogs, and I feel like that might be something. I mean, like I'm 5, and I feel like my height is like I'm small, and when I approach people, I always like, oh, smile, and oh yeah. I think like I feel harmless to people. That's what I thought of myself. So maybe it's like easier for me a little bit to take photos of like kids and dogs.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think it's easier to be a female street photographer, or photographer who photographs in the street, in a sense that it seems to be easier to invite yourself over to people's homes and be less threatening, which is something I do sometimes. And I think that there's also a real intention in my work of inclusivity. And, you know, for so long, I was pursuing something that was very exclusive, and the ability for me to see that everyone can participate and is worthy of participating in a grid, and has the right body and moves in the right way, has been a really affirming experience through the camera. And also I'm short, so I feel like
Something there.
being short and a female helps.
You know, I think there are subjects that certain people just can't do, you know? Like the pictures I showed of swimmers, you know, if a man had done it, first of all, the pictures would have looked completely different, a very different point of view. But they never would, the women would not have been comfortable. But the same could be said about men, not necessarily street photographers, but there are places that I probably couldn't go, and not just because they're dangerous, just because given my makeup, who I am, I just wouldn't have the kind of understanding and entree. So, you know, I think it can really work in your favor.
And street photographers tend to be like orthodox or liberal or other very strict ideas of what is proper. My approach is my comfort level. I am like asking people permission. I like to be a polite person. You know, I think about some very well-known male street photographers who'll go right up unannounced. I just couldn't do that. And I'm not judging anybody else. And I think that my guiding lights and inspirations, like Helen Levitt, helps me see children at play. Arbus is straightforward portraits of probably strangers in front of her, gives me permission to do it. And being female, I am I'm safety conscious. And of course, but photographing communities that I identify with, like LGBTQ plus communities, I mean, I'm totally comfortable because, you know, I belong there. Hello. But it's the magic of New York City, all the different kinds of people, we have a connection, and then I feel very privileged to be part of this incredible universe.
Thank you. I find it on the other side, I'm not a street photographer. I don't know how to work on the street. Whenever I think of street photographers, I think that they're very brave, and just to kind of have, to invite confrontation, perhaps. So I applaud you all for having that bravery. And we're gonna turn over to Q&A in a very quick moment. If you can just give me one word or just summarize it really quickly. What's the most inspiring thing about the city to you right now?
Someone else.
Oh, that's tough.
Should we just open it up to Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're in
That's a great
a
question.
really happening place right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my personal work, or what I'm saying is like, I'm going back out again photographing at
Yeah.
night. I'm having a blast. That's another, and that's a hard thing to do, because one of your questions is about like doing something new, blah, blah. You know, doesn't need to be new. I'm letting that go. If I'm just choosing and I'm having joy doing it, it's good enough reason for me to do it. And I hope it's good enough reason for you to choose whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, just the constant entropy of change in the city, in the visual backdrop of the city, the way light changes season to season. So, you know, we're entering into a really great light season, spring into early summer, which is, I think, one of the best light chapters. And so, I mean, I think as photographers, we can always rely on the fact that it's possible to constantly reinvent yourself in a place that has such an overabundance of visual stimulation, information, and shifting landscapes.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone in the audience?
Hello. Hi. I'm curious if you were here during COVID and how that might have changed how you approached photography, whether you found it inspiring that it was empty or a struggle, or how that kind of changed your work and maybe how it is now, how you look at the city.
Well, I'll tell you, after 9/11, everything changed. It used to be that you could walk into the museum on Ellis Island with a 4x5 camera and just start taking pictures. And then all of a sudden, or I would be under a bridge with my 4x5 taking pictures, and there would be 2 police cars or cops coming and demanding my film, you know. So that changed things a lot. And COVID actually, I wasn't living in the city at that point, but I was teaching in the city full time. And COVID really changed everything. I mean, there was just a very different feeling. And I don't know about people that are out on the street.
Well, I was working on a book, so it was really good to stay in for me. I just focus. But as soon as the mask, you were allowed to, not that mask mandate gone, but you're allowed to gather. And that was the first night I approached a friend of mine, Madame Vivian V, and I had not been going out again. I'd been there, done that, and they were performing in Sony Hall and Suzanne Barsh, and I said, can you put me on the guest list? I just couldn't wait to get out and be with people again. So that's how it affected me. But I agree with you. And anyone is here.
Yeah.
9/11, we're a different city. We're different people.
Yeah.
Is there another question?
Yes. Can I ask each of you what your camera of choice is at the moment?
Medium format. I use different medium formats. I'm getting older, and my 4x5 is heavy, and all the film holders and the whole thing. So medium format. Film? I'm working on a very large project in color, Portra 400.
I'm using mirrorless camera because it's like my hand is very small and I cannot really carry everything. I'm shaking when I'm shooting, so I need like light camera to just like fast and quick and get that moment done.
Oh, I'm scratching my button. I was initially a single lens reflex, medium format, 2.25, Tri-X 400, then point and shoot with slide film, 35 millimeter, digital format, phone. I'm back to my film 2.25. So they change, whatever your mood is.
Yeah, I have no loyalty to any brand. Very promiscuous in my cameras. I've been a Canon girl, I've been a Nikon girl, I've been Sony, Fuji, Mamiya. It's like, I have too many cameras and I can't make up my mind, so I'm
Do
a
you
little
still
all over the place.
keep all those cameras?
I know. That's why, yeah.
Is there a question back in the back?
Yeah, so as a street photographer, you can photograph the streets for 10, 20, 30 years. And when's the moment that you know when to stop, look at what you have done, and decide it's a moment for a book to be done, for an exhibit, even if you continue to go out, because we do that every day. When do you stop and say, okay, I'm going to put together what I've done so far and do a photo book or exhibit?
Would you rephrase that question?
Yeah, she was wondering about if you've been working on the streets for 10, 20, 30 years, when is it time to put that work into a book or to like stop and move on to something else?
I mean,
It took me 40 years.
Takes a long,
You
long
know,
time.
there's no one way. If you could do it early, go for it earlier. But don't beat yourself up if you don't do it. Just stay well, and give yourself time. For me, editing took time. It also took retirement.
Yeah. And it takes finances. It's very, very expensive to put a book out. So,
Or I would say, or I had a book that I was doing in the 70s and it got rejected and I shut down. That book ended up being realized, 45 years later. So, not so. If you have an idea to do it in your head, or prepare for it. And there are first book awards available to you. If you consider yourself a person of the book, and that is your dream, continue to go for it.
I think that, the life of like an artist or creative, there's this balance between two goods. There's the intrinsic good, like the love of doing the thing, and then there's the instrumental good, which is doing things like putting your work out there and getting opportunities. And I've come to realize that if I don't have a good balance of those two goods, things feel really off with me. And it's usually I am applying to too many things and not spending enough time with the intrinsic good. And so I think for me, it's more about sustainability and making sure that I am going out and photographing with all the noise of rejection letters and book pitches and all sorts of other things. And also just in terms of like the idea of editing is photography. It's like we're editing through our conscious mind, then we edit through the frame, and then we edit through the editing process. So I think it's important for me to have a very symbiotic relationship between the act of photographing and the act of looking at what I photographed and then going back and forth. And so that's kind of how I clarify my work.
editing is a big deal. It takes a long, long time. Initial edits are usually never the right ones. And so you have to keep going back and through everything again and again.
Yeah.
The beauty about documentary photography is it doesn't get outdated, it gets even more interesting.
Oh,
That's good music.
I like
for
that, thank you.
comment.
Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. The hour went by really fast. I just wanted to thank you all for, again,
thank you.
Thank you.
being part of this conversation.